into South Carolina family captures the nation's attention as the Murdaugh murders take more twists and turns. An arrest has been made in the shooting of a prominent South Carolina attorney. This story takes a lot of twists and turns, so bear with us. Police say it was an assisted suicide for hire. They say attorney Alex Murdaugh, this guy, hired a former client of his to shoot him in the head. And his story was going to be that he had pulled over with car trouble when he got shot. That guy's name is Curtis Edward. There he is right there. But he didn't kill the 53-year-old. State police say Murdaugh has admitted to hiring Smith to shoot him in the head so that his surviving son could collect $10 million in insurance money. Curtis Edward Smith now faces charges of assisted suicide, assault and battery, pointing and presenting a firearm, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. It goes on and on. No charges have been filed against Murdaugh himself, but he is called a co-defendant in charging documents for Smith. And authorities are also still investigating the unsolved murders of Murdaugh's wife, Maggie, and son, Paul, back in June. This story is now picking up a lot of national news attention. And back in June, when those first murders happened, Matt Harris of the Matt and Ramona show was immediately drawn to this when the mom and the son were found murdered. He started a podcast called the Murdaugh-Family-Murders, Impact of Influence, which now has more than 300,000 downloads. Matt was on Chris Cuomo's show tonight to talk about the case. And before he did that show, he talked with me about why this case is getting so much attention.
It is like Dukes of Hazzard and Dallas and Secession and Ozark and all these shows put together. I think that's the intrigue, this rich, wealthy family of privilege, and although everything's is coming tumbling down around them. We have had people tell us we should be quiet. We shouldn't. When we first started, they said, don't do it. It's not worth it. People that live down that area, people who are pretty influential in that area. And we know from someone close to the family that they are listening. At least some of the members of the family are listening to the podcast.
Okay, here's your panel tonight. WCCB News at 10 anchor Drew-Bollea and WCCB's Zach-Aldridge. So his time on Chris Cuomo tonight got cut short because of technical difficulties, but he's going back on Friday because there are so many tentacles to this story. We're not going to be able to get through it all tonight. Matt couldn't get through it all tonight on the show with Chris Cuomo. There's a lot. But now this bizarre twist that Alex Murdaugh is found in this middle of this remote southern road with a gunshot wound to the head, gets taken to the hospital, says doesn't know who did it, then admits, actually, I know who did it. I paid him to do it. I wanted him to kill me so that my surviving son could get the money. He's been pushed out of his influential law firm. The Murdaugh family is huge in law in South Carolina, very powerful, very influential. Now he's saying there's an opioid addiction involved, plus we've got the murders of the two children the mother and the son from back in June. Now there's a housekeeper's death that they're reopening the case into that. That's all the time we have, guys. Thank you for being here tonight.
We'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week. Drew, like, this is wild. I've never heard of a case like this.
Yeah, there's, again, just to make sure everybody at home knows, we're all just kind of speculating here if we go off tangent and talking about this because none of us are really investigating or reporting on this story. But this is going to have documentarians salivating over all the different details and ways that this is going and the interest that this is generating. I mean,
they already are. They're calling Matt.
Yeah, America's in love with murder mysteries. I mean, that's 90% of all the Netflix and HBO shows now. So this is something that is definitely captivating people. And Morgan, as you were saying, there is so much to this. You didn't even get to the boat crash where his son was driving a boat that crashed into a bridge or a dock and ended up killing somebody in that boat crash. And he was about to be indicted, or maybe was going to be indicted. And so, I mean, that's just another layer and wrinkle to this thing that really can get your head spinning if you get too deep into it.
Yeah, there are 5 bodies now connected to this case, different tentacles, Zach. So Alex Murdaugh's attorneys are now saying they can solve all of it They're going to do it by the end of this week, and then they're going to turn over their findings to SLED, and SLED's going to put the right people in prison for this.
Sure. This will all be tied up with a nice little bow come the end of the week. There is no chance that's going to happen at all. Forget a documentary. I just want a sensationalized movie drama on this where you probably don't even need to fabricate too many things because this is so crazy. I thought what's really interesting when you just go away from the details of the case of when talking about Matt doing this podcast, Morgan, was he worried at all for his safety? Because honestly, I feel like I would be spooked. I would probably be like, no, this isn't for me. If you're telling me not to go down this path, and we're talking money, and we're talking South Carolina, like I probably wouldn't want my hands at all.
Yeah. I don't think he's spooked, but I think he's cautious. He carefully vets. He says as the podcast has grown, they've had more than 300,000 downloads now. Again, it's called the Murdaugh-family-murders Impact of Influence. He says as the podcast has grown, they've gotten more credible sources coming forward to talk with them behind the scenes. And Matt works to vet that information, double source it, triple source it before he puts it on the podcast, because he knows with all this attention on there that he does, Zach, like you said, have to be careful with what he says, not only legally, but also perhaps, you know, just safety-wise as well.
No, that's really interesting, and it's a good podcast. If you haven't listened to it, it can get you caught up to speed. But there is a lot more to come on this case.
Yeah, fascinating.